everybody, so what are your strengths? Let's talk about this common job interview question, starting with how to answer it. If you're in a job interview and they ask you, what are your strengths? What are you going to say? Well, you're probably going to rattle off a list of positive things about yourself that will hopefully persuade them to select you. Now, contrary to popular belief, this question is actually very similar to another popular job interview question, why should we hire you? Think about it for a second. If they ask you, why should we hire you? What are you going to say? Well, you probably rattle off a list of positive things about yourself that will hopefully persuade them to select you, right? It's the same answer. It's because it's the same question. This is not really a very tough question to respond to, but it's actually a deceptively hard question to get the answer right. Let's dive in. Now, the problem with this question, okay, what are your strengths or why should we hire you? It's the same thing. The problem is that you might consider something you have a strength, but how do you know that the interviewer can also considers that to be a strength? Let me give you an example. Let's pretend I was in a job interview and an interviewer asked me, so Bill, what are your strengths? And I said, well, okay, my number one strength is that I tend to make very good decisions. Okay, I take the time necessary, I do my research, I don't buckle to pressure, and when I do make a decision, it's the right decision. I never have to go and redo work twice because I got it right the first time. I'm much more efficient that way, and it's because I make good decisions. That's my number one strength. Okay, so let's pretend I said this. Okay, now I consider this to be a good answer, and I'm being genuine. I genuinely do feel that way about myself. But unbeknownst to me, it turns out the job I was interviewing for, it's in a fast-paced environment, and they're looking for employees that can go, right? They can get things done. They can accomplish tasks. They can be productive. Okay? So when the interviewer hears my answer, they think, that's actually not what we're looking for. We don't want somebody sitting around mulling over decisions, doing research, getting other people's opinions. We want someone that can go. Right? They can just get on with it, get things done, accomplish tasks, and get work completed. Okay? We want people that will be productive. And so, I'm sorry, I think we're going to go with somebody else. That's the problem with this question. It's pretty easy to say things about ourselves that we consider to be strengths, but a lot of times, the interviewer doesn't necessarily consider them to be a strength. Okay? So how do we fix this? What can we say? Well, here is the answer. Okay? In the job posting, they've already given us what exactly they're looking for. Okay? There's usually a section called requirements, and they've listed some of the technical requirements for the job, right? They've said things like, we're looking for someone who's got 5 years experience in a senior role, or someone who has this educational qualification, or someone that has experience using these particular tools. Okay? So they've given this to us. Now, when they ask us, what are your strengths? A better answer is to go down the job requirements and speak to each one. Okay, so for example, they say, what are your strengths? And you say, well, my strengths are that I have 5 years in a similar role, right? I have this particular educational qualification, and I do have experience using these particular tools. Those are my strengths. Now, when you say this, the interviewers are thinking, oh, okay, this is stuff that they were looking for anyway. Now, the odds of you saying something that you think is good that they don't consider a strength, the chances of that goes down dramatically, okay, when you give this answer. However, we're not quite done here, okay? When I say go down the list of job requirements and speak to each one, what does that actually mean, okay? Now, if you meet the job requirements, you don't really have much of a problem. You say you have it, you meet it, right? And there's no issue. But what if you don't actually meet all the job requirements? Let's face it, most jobs that are posted, they usually have a long list of requirements, and the odds that you meet every single one to the letter are rather remote. So what if there's a specific job requirement that you don't actually meet? What do? Well, you might think that you would not mention it, but I disagree. I recommend that you do mention it, and that instead you say how, even though you don't mention it, how it's not going to be a problem. For example, let's say they're looking for a certain educational qualification, okay? Now, maybe you don't have that exact educational qualification, but you have something that might be a substitute for it. Okay, so you could maybe explain, well, I don't actually have this qualification, but I do have 2 years of a 4-year university degree where I took all the courses that pretty much covers everything that's in that qualification that you're looking for. So although I don't have it, I have been exposed to that. I am familiar with that knowledge. I've been taught it. I've applied it, and it's never been a problem before. Okay? So even though you don't actually meet the requirement, you can hopefully put their mind at ease that it's not going to be a problem. Okay? And that's all you have to do. A lot of times in job postings, all the requirements are all not absolutely necessary. It may not be a deal breaker if you don't meet 1 or 2 or possibly more of these requirements, okay? So, you know, if you have something that can substitute, or you can put their mind at ease in the sense that you have something that's comparable to it, that's what you explain, okay? You're using this question as a vehicle to communicate to them how you fit the job requirements, okay? That's its purpose, and that's the advantage of answering this way. Now, a question that comes up quite often is that, as a lot of us know, job interviews are not really necessarily about technical skills. A lot of the times they're about soft skills, okay? Soft skills, things like your charisma, how likable you are, you know, your communication skills, your interpersonal skills, your sense of protocol, your ability to persuade people, your ability to negotiate, maybe the quality of your written communication as well as your verbal communication, right? These are all soft skills. Even things like, you know, public speaking skills, negotiation skills, the list goes on and on, okay? A lot of times they can gauge your technical skills from your resume. But the reason why they invite you in for an interview and they want to meet you face to face is because they want to gauge your soft skills. So soft skills are what they're looking for, at least to a certain degree. So the question is, when they ask you, what are your strengths? Should you mention soft skills? This is a question that's been oft debated, okay? Now, I highly recommend that you don't mention soft skills, simply for the reason that soft skills are not something that you have to explain that you have. Soft skills are something that you're demonstrating you have just by you talking to them, okay? And that's what they're looking for. They want to see it firsthand. So if you say, you know, I'm a very likable person, you know, or I've got very good communication skills, they're judging you directly, not because of what you said that you have, but because what you demonstrate, okay? So often it's not necessary to explicitly state these, okay? However, there is a bit of a debate on this. Now, I would argue that when it comes to the pros and cons of whether you should mention soft skills, I would argue that it's a con. You shouldn't mention it because saying you have something doesn't prove that you have it, okay? However, if you do it a certain way, okay, it is possible to demonstrate that you understand the importance of a soft skill by virtue of the fact that you mentioned it, okay? So for example, if you're going for a customer service job and you suspect that something that you're going to have is you're going to have rapport with customers, and you're going to be the type of person that customers would enjoy speaking with, right? That's something that you could say that you have and thus prove that you understand the importance of that, but you leave it to your actual interaction during the job interview to demonstrate this, okay? That's what I would say about this. Now, the problem, of course, here is that you're having to guess as to which soft skills they consider a strength. And sometimes it's not super intuitive, because I have seen companies that, you know, for example, if you say that, you know, one of your strengths is that you're a very nice, positive person, okay, you would think that would be pretty benign and that anybody would find that to be a strength. But I have seen some companies that actively don't want that. For example, if you're up for a receptionist type job and you have to be the gatekeeper from the public that are calling into the company, and you know, you're the person that either forwards their call through or kind of stops them at the switchboard. I have seen some companies that don't want a very nice, amiable person. They want someone that can direct traffic, someone who can take care of business and deal with people and say no to people if necessary. And they might regard being super nice and amiable as not really a strength for this type of role. Just as an example, okay? So the problem with mentioning soft skills is that you have to take a guess as to which soft skills they would consider valuable. So one practical solution here is, if you do want to mention soft skills, you can say, maybe mention one or two of them, but they're not general soft skills that you have. They're soft skills that you feel are essential to this role or to this job. And for that reason, you might want to mention them.